don't care what fake papers you have. That car is stolen. Young lady, I've owned this car for 5 years. Young lady, you need to show some respect. I'm calling the police right now. My dash cam records everything, dear.
That was the moment Patricia Whitmore realized she'd made a terrible mistake. But let's back up. Because what happened in that driveway on a quiet Sunday afternoon in October wasn't just about a car. It was about assumptions. It was about prejudice. And it was about a woman who'd spent 40 years proving she belonged, only to have a stranger tell her she didn't. But before we get into what Patricia did next, and trust me, you won't believe how this unfolds, do me a favor, hit that like button if you're ready for this story. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we're covering stories like this every single day. This is the story of Dr. Vivian Catherine Reeves. And this is the day she'd finally had enough. It was 2:47 p.m. when Dr. Reeves pulled into her driveway. The engine of her Rolls-Royce Phantom purred softly as she turned off the ignition. Gospel music had been playing through the speakers, one of those old hymns that made her think of Sunday mornings in her grandmother's church. She hummed along, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel, completely at peace. The autumn sun was warm but not hot, that perfect 68 degrees where you could wear a light sweater and feel comfortable. The leaves were just starting to turn, splashes of gold and crimson against the deep green lawns of Willow Creek Estates. Everything smelled like fall, dried leaves and someone's fireplace burning somewhere down the street. Vivian opened the car door and stepped out, adjusting her church hat. She wore a burgundy dress that matched the custom interior of her Rolls-Royce, pearls catching the light. On the passenger seat sat a casserole dish, still warm, covered in aluminum foil. She'd promised Sister Margaret she'd bring her famous sweet potato casserole to the church potluck later that evening. She reached back into the car to grab the dish, careful not to spill it. Her grandchildren were coming next weekend. 7 and 9 years old, both of them. They loved riding in what they called Grandma's fancy car. She smiled thinking about their faces, the way they'd press their noses against the windows and wave at people on the street. The kind of day where nothing could go wrong. And then Patricia Whitmore appeared. But before we get to that, you need to understand who Dr. Vivian Catherine Reeves really was. Vivian was 68 years old, though most people said she looked 55. She attributed it to good genes, lots of water, and the fact that she'd finally retired 2 years ago and could actually sleep through the night. She'd lived in Willow Creek Estates for 7 years now, ever since leaving Memorial Hospital where she'd spent the last 4 decades. Dr. Reeves wasn't just any doctor. She was a neurosurgeon. And not just any neurosurgeon. She'd been the first black woman to ever lead the neurosurgery department at Memorial Hospital. 40 years of her life had gone into that career. Medical school debt, 80-hour work weeks, night shifts that bled into morning shifts, surgeries that lasted 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours. She'd saved lives. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Brain tumors, aneurysms, traumatic injuries, strokes. She'd held human brains in her hands. She'd stitched together bleeding vessels thinner than thread. She'd told families their loved ones would live, and sometimes she'd told them they wouldn't. Life and death decisions on her shoulders for 4 decades. And she'd done it all while being twice as good as everyone else, just to be seen as equal. The Rolls-Royce Phantom sitting in her driveway? She'd bought it in 2019, 4 years after her husband Thomas died. Cancer had taken him quickly. One day fine, the next day sick, and 6 months later gone. The life insurance policy had been substantial, but Vivian hadn't touched a penny. That money sat in a trust fund for her grandchildren's education. No, the Rolls-Royce came from her retirement savings. Her money. Money she'd earned by being excellent at her job, by sacrificing time with her family, by missing birthdays and anniversaries and school plays because someone's child needed emergency brain surgery. Her late husband had always driven practical cars. Hondas, Toyotas, things that got good gas mileage and never broke down. Vivian had been fine with that during her working years. But when Thomas died, something shifted. She realized she'd spent 40 years taking care of everyone else. Her patients, her family, her community. She'd given and given and given. So when she retired, she decided to give something to herself. The car wasn't about him. It was about her. Her statement to the world. After 40 years of proving herself, of working twice as hard, of being questioned and doubted and underestimated, that Rolls-Royce was her way of saying, I made it. I earned this. This is mine. She'd custom ordered it. Silver exterior because it was elegant and sophisticated. Burgundy interior because it was her favorite color and reminded her of the wine her grandmother used to make. Every detail had been her choice. Her taste. Her money. The registration was in her name. Vivian Catherine Reeves. The insurance was in her name. The title, stamped paid in full, was in her name. She kept all the documentation in a leather folder in the glove box, a habit from 40 years of keeping meticulous medical records. Every procedure, every prescription, every patient note had been documented. She carried that precision into every aspect of her life. And there was one more thing. The dashcam. It had been installed 2 years ago after a hit-and-run incident in the neighborhood. Someone's car had been sideswiped in the middle of the night, and there'd been no witnesses, no evidence. The HOA had sent out an email recommending everyone install security cameras. So Vivian had a front-facing dashcam that recorded whenever the car was running, with a battery backup that could capture footage even when parked. She'd never needed the footage. Never even thought about it. It was just there, a small red light blinking on the dashboard recording everything. Until today. Willow Creek Estates was the kind of neighborhood where houses started at $800,000 and went up from there. Manicured lawns, perfectly trimmed hedges, flower beds that looked like they belonged in magazines. The HOA had rules about everything. Paint colors, grass height, parking spots, mailbox styles. Dr. Reeves' home was an elegant brick colonial with white shutters and a rose garden she tended herself. She had an American flag hanging from her porch. Her lawn was always immaculate. She followed every HOA rule to the letter. She was, by all accounts, a model neighbor. The neighborhood kids called her the cookie grandma because she always had fresh-baked cookies for them. She knew everyone's names. She waved at people driving past. She donated to neighborhood fundraisers, attended HOA meetings, volunteered at the community center. She belonged there. She'd earned her place. But to some people that didn't matter. Vivian set the casserole dish on the hood of her car and opened the back door to grab her purse. Still humming that gospel song, still thinking about next weekend with her grandchildren, still completely at peace. The weather was perfect. 68 degrees, golden October sunlight streaming through the trees, a light breeze that made the leaves dance. A couple of kids were riding bikes down the street. Someone was mowing their lawn a few houses down. The air smelled like autumn, like possibility, like home. Across the street, Sandra Thompson was watering her flower beds. She was 45, worked from home as a graphic designer, always kept to herself but was friendly enough. She waved at Dr. Reeves. Vivian waved back. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. And then a BMW came screeching around the corner. If you've ever been judged based on how you look, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see how this ends. Patricia Whitmore's BMW came to an abrupt stop in front of Dr. Reeves' house. The tires made that sharp squealing sound on the pavement. The car door flew open before the engine was even fully off, and Patricia stepped out like a woman on a mission. Patricia was 52 years old, though she'd tell you she was 48. Expensive yoga pants and a designer jacket, the kind with the label prominently displayed on the sleeve. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. She had that pinched expression around the mouth, like she'd been sucking on lemons her whole life. She was the president of the HOA. Had been for 3 years now. And she took her job very, very seriously. Too seriously, most neighbors would say, though never to her face. Patricia had a habit of driving around the neighborhood looking for violations. Someone's trash can left out past noon? Citation. Someone's grass a quarter-inch too tall? Citation. Parked on the street overnight? Citation. She claimed it was about maintaining property values. About keeping Willow Creek Estates the kind of place where people wanted to live. About standards and community and excellence. But really it was about control. About power. About being important in a life that had otherwise left her feeling very small. Her heels clicked aggressively on the sidewalk as she stormed across Dr. Reeves' perfectly manicured lawn. She didn't use the walkway. Didn't follow the little stone path that curved gracefully from the street to the front door. No, she marched straight across the grass, leaving divots from her heels in the soft earth. Dr. Reeves saw her coming inside. This wasn't the first time Patricia had shown up with some complaint. Last month it had been about the height of her rose bushes. The month before, Patricia had insisted that Vivian's American flag was half an inch too large for HOA regulations. It wasn't, of course. Vivian had measured it 3 times just to be sure. But she'd learned over the years that some battles weren't worth fighting. So she'd smiled politely, shown Patricia the measurements, and watched the woman stomp away frustrated. Today felt different though. There was something in Patricia's face. Something harder. Meaner. Dr. Reeves straightened up, smoothing down her dress, preparing herself. 40 years of dealing with difficult patients and their families had taught her how to maintain composure under pressure. And then Patricia started shouting. "Excuse me. Whose car is that?" Dr. Reeves carefully set down her purse on the hood next to the casserole dish. She turned to face Patricia with that same calm, measured expression she'd used in 1,000 difficult conversations. "Good afternoon, Patricia. This is my car." Patricia's eyes swept over the Rolls-Royce like she was seeing it for the first time, even though it had been parked in this driveway for 5 years. She looked at it the way you might look at something that didn't belong, something out of place, something wrong. "No, it's not. That's a Rolls-Royce. That car costs more than most houses. Where did you get it?" "I purchased it 5 years ago." Patricia let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Purchased it? With what money? You're retired. You don't work." There it was. That assumption. That casual dismissal. The idea that someone who looked like Dr. Reeves couldn't possibly afford something like a Rolls-Royce. Not through legitimate means anyway. Dr. Reeves felt that familiar tightness in her chest. She'd felt it 1,000 times before. In medical school when professors questioned her test scores. During her residency when attendings asked if she was a nurse. As a surgeon when patients asked to see the real doctor. After 40 years, you'd think she'd be used to it. You'd think it would stop hurting. It never did. But her voice stayed level, her tone patient. "Patricia, I was a neurosurgeon for 40 years. I'm quite capable of affording my vehicle." "A neurosurgeon? You?" "Yes. I led the neurosurgery department at Memorial Hospital." Patricia's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England." Across the street, Sandra Thompson had stopped watering her flowers. She was watching now, her hand still holding the hose, water pooling around her feet. But she didn't move. Didn't intervene. Just watched. Dr. Reeves' jaw tightened. Her hands started to shake just slightly. Not from fear. From anger. From exhaustion. From the bone-deep weariness of having to prove yourself over and over and over again to people who'd already decided you were guilty. Patricia stepped closer, invading Vivian's personal space. "I know what you people do. You lease these cars or rent them or steal them just to look important in neighborhoods like this. You people." Those two words hung in the air between them like a slap. Dr. Reeves' face hardened. "You people?" Patricia backtracked, but only slightly. "I didn't mean, I just meant, look, the HOA has rules about unauthorized vehicles. This vehicle is authorized. I've lived here 7 years, Patricia. You know this." But Patricia was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through something, her face flushed with righteous anger. 7 years of living next to this woman, 7 years of seeing her at HOA meetings and neighborhood barbecues and community events, and somehow that still wasn't enough. Somehow Vivian was still suspicious. Still other. Still not one of them. A car pulled up. Robert Whitmore, Patricia's husband. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and defeated eyes. The kind of man who'd spent years apologizing for his wife's behavior. He saw Patricia confronting Dr. Reeves and closed his eyes, just for a moment, like he was gathering strength. He got out slowly. "Patty, what are you doing?" Patricia whirled on him. "Stay out of this, Robert. Someone has to protect our property values." Robert opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, wanted to tell his wife she was being ridiculous, wanted to apologize to Dr. Reeves and drag Patricia home. But he didn't. He just stood there, useless, enabling. Patricia turned back to Dr. Reeves, her voice rising. "I want to see your registration right now. Prove you own this car." Dr. Reeves stood very still. She didn't have to prove anything to this woman. Patricia had no authority to demand documentation. She wasn't a police officer. She wasn't a government official. She was just a busybody with a title and too much time. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Yes, you do. I'm the HOA president. You're probably hiding something." "Robert, call the police." That's when Dr. Reeves realized this wasn't going to end with Patricia stomping away frustrated. This was going to escalate. This was going to get worse before it got better. She exhaled slowly, that measured breath she'd learned to take before walking into the operating room. The breath that centered her, calmed her, prepared her for what came next. Fine. She moved to the driver's side door and opened the glove box. Inside was a leather folder, brown and worn from years of use. She pulled it out and carried it back to the front of the car, laying it on the hood next to the casserole dish. Inside were all the documents. The registration, dated 2019, with her name printed clearly at the top. Vivian Catherine Reeves. The insurance card, current and valid. The title, stamped paid in full in red ink. The original purchase receipt from the dealership, showing the full price paid in cash. She laid them out one by one like evidence in a trial. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? A trial. She was the accused. Patricia was the prosecutor. And the neighborhood was the jury. Patricia snatched up the documents, squinting at them like she was looking for a forgery. She held the registration up to the light. She turned the title over, examining the back. She studied the receipt like it contained hidden codes. These could be fake. People forge documents all the time. They're not fake, Patricia. How do I know you didn't steal someone's identity? Or borrow this from some rich employer? Maybe you clean houses for someone wealthy and borrowed their car. And there it was. The final insult. The assumption that a black woman with an expensive car must be a domestic worker. Must be cleaning someone else's toilets and borrowing their things. Dr. Reeves' voice shook, not with fear but with controlled fury. I have never cleaned a house for money in my life. Not that there's shame in that work, but that's not my work. Then whose car is this really? Robert tried again, his voice weak. Patty, this is ridiculous. Patricia cut him off. Robert, call 911. No. Robert hesitated. For a moment it looked like he might refuse. For a moment, it looked like he might be the voice of reason, the one who would stop this insanity before it went too far. But he didn't. He just stood there. Do it, or I will. Patricia pulled out her phone. Her fingers were already moving, already dialing. Across the street, Sandra Thompson pulled out her phone too. But she wasn't calling anyone. She was recording. The camera pointed directly at Patricia and Dr. Reeves, capturing everything. Dr. Reeves noticed. She gave Sandra a subtle nod. Sandra nodded back. Dr. Reeves turned back to Patricia, her voice quiet but firm. The dashcam in my car has been recording this entire conversation, Patricia. Patricia's eyes flicked to the car, to the small blinking red light on the dashboard. For just a second, uncertainty crossed her face. But then it hardened again, that defensive anger of someone who knows they're wrong but can't back down now. I don't care what some camera shows. You're still suspicious. The phone was already at Patricia's ear. She'd made her choice. She was all in now. There was no going back. And Dr. Vivian Reeves, 68 years old, retired neurosurgeon, first black woman to lead her department, grandmother of 2, upstanding member of the community for 7 years, stood in her driveway and waited for the police to arrive. Because she'd been here before. Not exactly here, not this exact situation, but close enough. She'd been doubted before. Questioned before. Accused before. And she'd survived it all. She'd survived this too. If this story is hitting differently, smash that like button. Patricia's voice trembled as she spoke into the phone. It was a performance. Dr. Reeves recognized it immediately. The sudden shakiness, the breathless fear, the damsel in distress routine. She's getting aggressive. She's threatening me with some recording device. Dr. Reeves hadn't moved. Her hands were at her sides, clearly visible. Her voice had been steady the entire time. But facts didn't matter now. Patricia was creating a narrative, and truth was just a casualty. I haven't moved from this spot. Patricia ignored her, turning to her husband instead. You see how she's acting. Robert looked at the ground. He couldn't even meet Dr. Reeves' eyes. Coward. Patricia turned her attention back to the phone. Yes, 911? I need police at 4782 Magnolia Drive, Willow Creek Estates. There was a pause. The dispatcher's voice was faint, tinny through the phone speaker. What's the emergency? There's a black woman in our neighborhood with a very expensive car, and she's refusing to show proper identification. She's being aggressive and threatening. I'm the HOA president and I feel unsafe. Please hurry. Every word was a lie. Or a distortion. Or a manipulation. Dr. Reeves had shown identification. Multiple forms of it. She hadn't been aggressive. Hadn't threatened anyone. Hadn't even raised her voice. But Patricia had said the magic words. Black. Aggressive. Threatening. In some neighborhoods, in some situations, those words were a weapon. Sometimes a deadly one. Dr. Reeves felt it then. That old familiar fear. The kind she tried to teach her son about when he was a teenager. The talk that black parents had to have with their children about how to survive a police encounter. Hands visible. Voice calm. No sudden movements. Yes or no, sir. Comply with everything, even if it's wrong, even if it's unjust, because being right won't matter if you're dead. She moved her hands to her sides, making sure they were in plain view. She kept her posture relaxed but non-threatening. Her voice when she spoke was measured, controlled. The dashcam was still recording. That small red light still blinking. Every word. Every moment. Every lie. More neighbors were emerging now. Someone 2 houses down had come out to get their mail and stopped to watch. A couple walking their dog had paused at the end of the driveway. The neighborhood kids had abandoned their bikes to see what was happening. Everyone is watching. No one helped. Vivian's mind flashed back. She couldn't stop it. Couldn't control it. The memory hit her like a wave, pulling her under. It was 1987. Her first year as an attending physician. She'd just finished her residency, had just been hired at Memorial Hospital. She'd worked so hard to get there. Medical school at the top of her class. Residency where she'd barely slept, barely eaten, just worked and studied and proved herself over and over again. Her first day on the job, a white patient had taken one look at her and said, "I want a real doctor." She tried to explain. She was a doctor. She'd shown her credentials. Her white coat with her name embroidered on it. Her hospital badge. Everything. The patient had called for security. Had claimed she was impersonating a physician. Hospital security had actually shown up. Had actually asked her to prove who she was. She'd had to show her badge 3 times. 3 times while her patient waited, while other doctors watched, while nurses whispered. Her mentor, an older black surgeon who'd blazed trails before her, had pulled her aside afterward. He'd looked tired. So tired. You'll have to be twice as good and work twice as hard. And even then they'll question if you belong. She'd carried those words for 40 years. They'd been her armor and her burden. She'd been twice as good. She'd worked twice as hard. She'd saved lives. She'd trained other surgeons. She'd broken barriers and shattered ceilings. And here she was, standing in her driveway being treated like a criminal because she owned a nice car. The sound of sirens pulled her back to the present. They were still distant but getting closer. That distinctive wail that made your stomach drop, made your heart race, made your hands sweat no matter how innocent you were. Dr. Reeves took a breath. Centered herself. She'd been preparing for this moment her whole life, hadn't she? She knew the script. She knew the steps. "Patricia, I've shown you my documentation. I've answered your questions. We will wait for the police and they will confirm what I've told you." Patricia's face was flushed with victory. "You're awfully confident for someone who's lying." "I'm confident because I'm telling the truth." But Patricia wasn't listening anymore. She was riding high on righteousness and adrenaline. She stepped closer to Dr. Reeves, pointing her finger inches from Vivian's face. "You think you can just move into our neighborhood?" "I've lived here 7 years, Patricia." Robert finally found his voice. "Patty, stop. You're making this worse." Patricia shook him off like he was an annoying insect. "I'm protecting our community." More neighbors now. At least a dozen people had gathered, keeping their distance but watching. Some had their phones out, filming. Others were just standing there with their arms crossed, waiting to see how this would play out. Not one of them spoke up for Dr. Reeves. Not one of them said, "Hey, I know this woman. She lives here. She's our neighbor. Leave her alone." They just watched. The sirens were louder now. Close. The casserole dish was still sitting on the hood of the car, probably cold by now. Dr. Reeves thought about the church potluck later that evening. About Sister Margaret waiting for that sweet potato casserole. About how she was going to have to call and explain why she wouldn't be there. About how this moment, this violation, would become a story she'd have to tell over and over again. Patricia was still talking, still performing. Still rehearsing her victim's story for when the police arrived. Robert stood behind her, useless and silent. Sandra across the street was still filming, her phone steady, capturing everything. The wait felt eternal. 3 minutes. Maybe 5. Time moved strangely when you were waiting for the police, especially when you knew you'd done nothing wrong but weren't sure that would matter. Dr. Reeves kept her hands visible. Kept her voice calm. kept her posture non-threatening, did everything she'd been taught to do to survive this. And then a squad car turned onto the street, lights flashing, siren wailing. The sound echoed off the houses, loud and intrusive in this quiet neighborhood. The car pulled up in front of Dr. Reeves' house and stopped. The siren cut off. The lights kept flashing, blue and red, painting everything in alternating colors. The driver's side door opened. And Officer James Mitchell stepped out. He was tall, black, probably mid-40s. He had that look that veteran cops get, that seen-it-all weariness mixed with professional competence. His uniform was crisp. His badge caught the light. He moved with the calm authority of someone who'd been doing this job for a long time. Patricia rushed toward him immediately. The tears started flowing like someone had turned on a faucet. "Officer, thank God you're here. This woman showed up with this expensive car and she's being so aggressive and threatening and she won't show proper ID and I think the car might be stolen." Officer Mitchell raised one hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Ma'am, slow down. Let me assess the situation." He turned away from Patricia, leaving her standing there with her mouth open mid-performance. He walked toward Dr. Reeves, his eyes taking in everything. The car. The documents still spread out on the hood. The casserole dish. Dr. Reeves standing there in her church clothes with her hands clearly visible. Their eyes met. And something clicked. Officer Mitchell's expression changed. Just slightly. A flicker of recognition. His eyes widened just a fraction. He looked at her face, really looked at her, and something in his memory stirred. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Can you tell me what's happening here?" Dr. Reeves' voice was steady, dignified. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm Dr. Vivian Reeves. I live here at 4782 Magnolia Drive. I own this vehicle. This woman, Patricia Whitmore, has accused me of stealing it despite me showing her registration, title, insurance, and purchase receipt." She gestured to the documents still laid out on the hood. Officer Mitchell moved closer, examining each one carefully. He picked up the registration, studied it, set it down, picked up the title, read it thoroughly, set it down, looked at the insurance card, the purchase receipt. He took his time. Professional. Thorough. And with each document he examined, his expression grew more serious. He looked up from the documents and studied Dr. Reeves' face again. Really studied it this time. And then it clicked fully into place. "Dr. Reeves? From Memorial Hospital?" Dr. Reeves felt something loosen in her chest. "Yes. I retired 2 years ago." Officer Mitchell's voice changed. Became softer. More personal. "You operated on my daughter. 12 years ago. Jasmine Mitchell. She had a brain tumor." And just like that, Dr. Reeves remembered. A little girl 8 years old, with a glioma the size of a golf ball pressing against her brain stem. The parents had been terrified. The father had been a police officer, she remembered now. He'd held his daughter's hand right up until they'd wheeled her into the OR. The surgery had been delicate. Dangerous. One wrong move and the child could have been paralyzed or dead. But Vivian's hands had been steady. They'd always been steady. She'd gotten it all. Every bit of the tumor. Clean margins. No complications. The little girl had woken up and asked for her daddy. One of the good days. One of the saves. Dr. Reeves' face softened with the memory. Jasmine. 8 years old. Glioma. How is she? Officer Mitchell's voice was thick with emotion. She's in college now. Pre-med. Because of you. Behind them, Patricia's face had drained of all color. The blood had literally left her face, leaving her pale and shocked. She'd just called the police on the woman who'd saved a police officer's daughter's life. The woman who was very clearly not a car thief. This is the moment everything changed. If you're feeling this, hit that subscribe button. Officer Mitchell turned away from Dr. Reeves and faced Patricia. His entire demeanor had changed. The professional courtesy was gone. What remained was barely controlled anger. "Ma'am, these documents are all legitimate. Dr. Reeves is the legal owner of this vehicle. She's lived in this neighborhood for 7 years. You've filed a false police report." Patricia started backpedaling immediately. But I was just concerned. I was protecting the neighborhood. It was an honest mistake." Officer Mitchell's voice was hard. "You told dispatch she was aggressive and threatening. I see a woman standing calmly in her driveway with valid documentation. What I don't see is any threat. Well, I felt threatened. She could have. Ma'am, feeling threatened doesn't make someone a criminal. You racially profiled this woman and wasted police resources. The words hung in the air. Racially profiled. Out loud. Undeniable. Patricia's face flushed red. I did not. I would never. I just... Officer Mitchell cut her off. I could cite you for filing a false report. That's a misdemeanor. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. Dr. Reeves, would you like to press charges? Patricia's eyes went wide. Charges? For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Dr. Reeves had power. Real power. The kind that came with the law on your side, with a police officer asking if you wanted justice, with the person who'd wronged you finally understanding there would be consequences. She looked at Patricia. Really looked at her. Saw the fear in her eyes, the humiliation, the dawning realization that she'd miscalculated badly. That her assumptions had been wrong. That her privilege wouldn't protect her this time. Dr. Reeves thought about it. She could press charges. Patricia deserved it. She'd lied to 911, had made false accusations, had harassed and humiliated a neighbor for no reason other than the color of her skin and the car she drove. But Dr. Reeves had been fighting battles her whole life. She was tired. And she knew something Patricia didn't understand yet. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't punishment. It was letting someone live with the consequences of their actions. No officer. No charges. Patricia sagged with relief. Thank you. Dr. Reeves held up one hand, cutting her off. But I will be filing a formal complaint with the HOA board. And I will be requesting your removal as president. Patricia's relief evaporated. You can't do that. Watch me. Officer Mitchell nodded approvingly. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you leave Dr. Reeves alone. If I'm called back here for another false report, you will be cited. Understood? Patricia didn't answer. She just stood there, humiliated, deflated, her entire world crashing down around her. Everything she'd built, her position, her power, her authority in this neighborhood, all of it circling the drain because she couldn't see past her prejudice. She turned and stormed toward her car, heels clicking on the pavement. Robert lingered behind, looking at Dr. Reeves with something that might have been shame. Dr. Reeves, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Couldn't even articulate what this was. An injustice. A violation. A racist attack. He just trailed off and followed his wife, shoulders hunched, defeated. Officer Mitchell watched them go, then turned back to Dr. Reeves. Dr. Reeves, I apologize you had to deal with this. Not your fault, officer. But thank you. Jasmine asks about you sometimes. The doctor who saved her life. Dr. Reeves smiled softly. Tell her I'm proud of her. Officer Mitchell nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more, wanted to apologize for the system, for the world, for all the Patricia Whitmores who made assumptions based on skin color. But what could he say? They both knew this wasn't an isolated incident. They both knew Dr. Reeves had probably dealt with versions of this her entire life. He got back in his patrol car and drove away, leaving Dr. Reeves standing alone in her driveway. Sandra Thompson crossed the street, her phone still in her hand. Dr. Reeves, I recorded everything. If you need it. Thank you, Sandra. Some of us see you. Some of us appreciate you. Sandra squeezed Dr. Reeves' hand and walked back to her house. The other neighbors were dispersing now, going back to their lives, already turning this into a story they'd tell at dinner parties. Dr. Reeves was alone. She picked up the casserole dish from the hood of the car. It was cold now. Completely cold. She'd have to reheat it before the potluck. She looked at her Rolls-Royce, ran her hand along the smooth silver hood. This car that she'd earned. That she'd bought with her money, earned through her excellence, chosen with her taste. This car that someone had decided she couldn't possibly deserve. We're almost at the end, but before we get there, hit that like button if you believe in justice. Patricia Whitmore saw a black woman with an expensive car and decided a crime had been committed. She didn't see the 40 years of medical school debt. The student loans that had taken a decade to pay off. The nights when Vivian had eaten ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches so she could make her loan payments and still have enough left over to buy textbooks. She didn't see the 80-hour work weeks. The shifts that started at 6 in the morning and ended at midnight. The surgeries that ran so long Vivian's legs would shake from standing for 12 hours straight. The times she'd gone 3 days without sleep because the emergencies kept coming and someone had to be there to save lives. She didn't see the night shifts. The 2 a.m. phone calls about patients crashing. The car accidents and gunshot wounds and aneurysms that didn't care what time it was. The holidays spent in the OR instead of with her family. The birthdays missed, the anniversaries forgotten, the school plays she'd never attended because someone else's child needed her more. She didn't see the lives saved, the brain tumors removed, the bleeds stopped, the strokes reversed. The children who'd gone on to graduate high school and college and get married and have children because Dr. Vivian Reeves had steady hands and a brilliant mind. She didn't see the barriers broken. The first black woman in her medical school class. The first black woman in her residency program. The first black woman to lead the neurosurgery department at Memorial Hospital. Every step forward had been a battle. Every achievement had come with whispers and doubts and people questioning if she'd really earned it or if it was just affirmative action, just diversity quotas, just luck. She just saw black skin and made an assumption. That assumption cost her everything. 3 weeks later, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Sandra Thompson had submitted the video footage. Other neighbors had come forward with their own stories of Patricia's behavior, her overreach, her harassment disguised as concern for property values. The vote was unanimous. Patricia Whitmore was removed as HOA president. Sandra Thompson took her place. Patricia and Robert moved out of Willow Creek Estates 2 months later. Some said it was because Robert got a job transfer. Others said they couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. But everyone knew the real reason. Patricia couldn't face the neighbors anymore. Couldn't walk down the street without people knowing what she'd done. Couldn't go to the community center or the neighborhood barbecues without feeling the weight of their judgment. She'd made herself unwelcome in the place she tried to protect from people like Dr. Reeves. The irony was not lost on anyone. Dr. Vivian Reeves still lives in Willow Creek Estates. Still in that elegant brick colonial with the rose garden and the American flag. Her lawn is still immaculate. Her roses still bloom every spring. She still drives her Rolls-Royce. Still pulls into that same driveway where Patricia Whitmore tried to tell her she didn't belong. The silver paint still gleams in the sun. The burgundy interior still smells like leather and luxury. The dashcam still records just in case. She still waves to the neighborhood kids. Still has fresh-baked cookies waiting when they come by on their bikes. They still call her the cookie grandma. They still love her. She still brings casseroles to church potlucks. Still attends HOA meetings, though now Sandra runs them and they're much shorter and much less contentious. Still volunteers at the community center. She still belongs. Because she always did. Her grandchildren visited the weekend after the incident. 7 and 9 years old, bright-eyed and excited. They rode in Grandma's fancy car, pressed their noses against the windows, waved at everyone they passed. The older one asked her, "Grandma, why was that lady so mean to you?" Dr. Reeves thought about how to answer. Thought about what lessons to pass down, what wisdom to share. How do you explain racism to a child? How do you tell them that some people will hate them for the color of their skin? That they'll have to be twice as good and work twice as hard? That even then someone might call the police on them for existing? In the end, she said, "Some people make assumptions, baby. They see someone who looks different from them and they assume the worst. But you know what? Their assumptions are their problem, not ours. We know who we are. We know what we've earned. And we don't let anyone make us feel small." The child thought about this. Then asked, "Did you show her, Grandma?" Dr. Reeves smiled. "Yes, baby. I showed her." Officer James Mitchell stopped by the following week, off-duty in civilian clothes. He brought his daughter Jasmine with him. She was 20 now, tall and poised, wearing a pre-med hoodie from her university. Jasmine didn't remember much about being 8 years old and sick. Didn't remember the fear, the pain, the surgery. But she remembered the kind doctor who'd held her hand and promised everything would be okay. And it had been. They sat in Dr. Reeves' living room and drank sweet tea and talked about Jasmine's future. What kind of doctor she wanted to be. What specialty she was considering. The challenges she'd face as a black woman in medicine. Dr. Reeves told her the truth. Told her it would be hard. Told her people would doubt her, question her, underestimate her. Told her she'd have to be twice as good and work twice as hard. But then she told her something else. Something more important. You'll survive it. You'll more than survive it. You'll thrive. Because you're strong and smart and determined. And because you'll have people who came before you, who fought these battles so you wouldn't have to fight them alone. You'll stand on our shoulders. And then someday someone will stand on yours. Jasmine left that day with tears in her eyes and fire in her heart. The video that Sandra Thompson recorded never went viral. Dr. Reeves didn't want it to. Didn't want to become a symbol or a hashtag or a trending topic. She'd spent her whole life being excellent at her job, not famous for being victimized. But the video was submitted as evidence in her HOA complaint. And it was seen by everyone who mattered. Everyone who needed to know what had happened. Everyone who would make sure it didn't happen again. Sometimes justice doesn't need to be public to be real. Dr. Vivian Catherine Reeves is 68 years old. She's survived medical school, residency, 40 years as a surgeon, the loss of her husband, and countless incidents of racism, both blatant and subtle. She's saved hundreds of lives. Trained dozens of surgeons. Broken barriers and opened doors. Made the world a little bit better, one surgery at a time. And she drives a Rolls-Royce. Because she earned it. Because she deserves it. Because after 40 years of proving herself, she decided to buy something that made her happy. And no one, not Patricia Whitmore, not the HOA, not anyone, gets to tell her she doesn't deserve the life she built. She still belongs. She always did. If this story touched you, we need you to do 3 things. 1. Subscribe to this channel. 2. Hit that like button. 3. Share this story. Because stories like Dr. Reeves' story need to be told.